Welcome to Gulf Rising. I am your host, Misha Mayer. You are listening to 102.3 WHIV LP New Orleans. We are not a radio station with a mission. We are a mission with a radio station. That mission is to end all wars. In this series, we will be talking about the climate wars.
Well, I want to see this beautiful city. Yes, I want to see that beautiful city. Well, I want to see that beautiful city. I'd like to see that beautiful city one of these days. One of these days, and I want to sit at the welcome table. Yeah, I want to sit at the welcome table. Well, I want to sit at the welcome table. I want to sit at the welcome table. See that beautiful city one of these days. Oh, one of these days. And I like to sing and never get tired. Well, I want to sing and never get tired. Yes, I want to sing and never get tired. I'd like to sing and never get tired. Sit at the welcome table. See that beautiful city one of these days. One of these days.
Every day, somewhere on Earth, someone makes the painful decision to leave their home and find safety. Climate change is here now. It's ravaging the planet. Extreme weather, storms, sea level rise, drought, famine, food insecurity, disease, landslides, fires, floods, forcing people to leave their homes and leave everything behind to try to find a safer place. The United Nations predicts between 200 million and 2 billion climate refugees will be forced to find new homes in the next several decades. Where are all of those people going to go? For the past 5 years, I've been tracking the story of climate refugees across the planet, from the Caribbean to fires in the west of the United States, to hurricanes in southern Louisiana, drought and famine and displacement in Kenya and Tanzania, to landslides in Brazil, to political displacement and the threat of extractive industry in Peru, moving entire cities in Bangladesh, and refugees washing the shores of southern Italy. And yet this crisis is still in its infancy. All across the world, governments are acknowledging this climate crisis, but they're not building aid stations or climate mitigation. They're building walls and detention camps. Governments are militarizing their borders, whipping up xenophobia, hatred, and racism. But with 200 million to 2 billion climate refugees, a militarization and incarceration policy looks like a Mad Max future. But a wall on its side can be a table, the welcome table. So, we're inviting all of the people in this film, the mutual aid workers and the refugees themselves from all over the world and all over the United States, to New Orleans, to sit at a single table together, the welcome table. We'll sit and tell each other stories and eat and heal. But that's not all. We're going to build that table 1,000 feet long, and we're going to invite the entire city of New Orleans to come and sit with us. It'll be an event like nothing that's ever happened before in history, celebrating people, our differences, our cultures, celebrating what we have to teach each other. Right now, we're raising funds to bring the climate refugees that are in this film to New Orleans and secure the necessary permits for the table and for a gathering of thousands to create a vision of the future where welcoming is stronger than hate, where food and celebration are stronger than violence and prisons. And we're going to make that a movie and put it on HBO. Can you be a part of it? Will you join us? Because when you have more than you need, you shouldn't build a higher wall. you should build a longer table. We're building that table. Be a part of it.
And I'm the train they call the city of New Orleans. And I'll be gone 500 miles before the day is done.
Today, I am joined by American film director and environmental activist, best known for his Oscar-nominated, Emmy-winning 2010 documentary Gasland, Josh Fox, here to talk to us about his newest project, The Welcome Table.
The Welcome Table is it's a film that I have been making for the last 5 years all across the world about climate refugees, about people who are displaced by climate change or the act of displacement from climate change. And this is a huge, huge looming problem that no one is really talking about nearly enough. I mean, it's being talked about, it's starting to be talked about. But the United Nations predicts that something like 1 billion people are going to be displaced over the next several decades. That's like a huge amount of the population of the planet Earth. 1 out of every 3 Americans is going to be displaced by climate change. In fact, I saw a study yesterday or 2 days ago that said half of the houses in the United States are imperiled for severe damage or destruction by climate change. Half of all the houses. So, that's not good. That's bad. About 7 years ago, I made a film called How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change. And I've been working on the issue of climate change for more than 10 years. And, 10 years ago, we were saying, listen, we've got to act on this now. We've got to do something now, or else really dire impacts are coming. And so at this point, we're saying that even more, but dire impacts are coming no matter what we do. There is a certain amount of upheaval that unfortunately at this point is sort of locked in. When you're steering the Titanic, you have to steer away from the iceberg early in the game, or else there's no amount of pivoting that you can do, you're going to hit it. So the truth of the matter is, we're in for the most intense period of change that human beings have ever navigated in our entire species history. And we're in for the largest migration that's ever going to happen in human history. And that's all coming within our lifetimes. So, I started to think about this and realized that that we're not really preparing at all. And that in fact, governments are preparing. They're just not telling us what their preparations are. The preparations for climate change from a lot of governments, not just the United States government, are walls, militarization of borders, incarceration, xenophobia, racism, and increasing the carceral state, increasing the amount of people that they can incarcerate for whatever reason. That to me looks like a Mad Max future, like a crazy, crazy future. The alternative is that we welcome people, right? We have to get really good at welcoming. And welcoming, as it turns out, is not that easy to do, right? It involves a lot of really intense cultural conversations, cultural negotiations. It involves a lot of generosity. It involves a lot of sharing. It involves a lot of emergency management. It involves a lot of cultural sensitivity and learning how to get the most benefit out of celebrating people's cultures rather than attacking them, right? So there are real historical precedents for welcoming huge numbers of people. And it's always been beneficial, especially in the United States, right? Like I unearthed cartoons from 1907, which showed these brown-faced, bandito-mustached rats that were crawling out of the boats in the New York harbor. And on the top of their hats, they said anarchist, socialist, communist, mafia. And it said, from the slums of Europe every day. And these were Italians. These were racist cartoons against Italians. They weren't Mexicans. They weren't Black people. They were Italians. Now, you can't even imagine New York City without pizza. You can't even imagine the United States without going to the, to get some spaghetti meatballs or lasagna, whatever. The bottom line is the same racism, different races, same xenophobia, different century. We have to understand that the people who are arriving now to the United States and this giant migration that's happening all across the world is
first of all, it's not happening because people want to move necessarily, but it's also happening. It can, in fact, be an amazing cultural moment for us all over the planet, where we learn from each other, where we celebrate each other, where we have whatever the next form of pizza is, like everywhere. You know what I mean?
I
And
think
then
it's
we have to
birria
understand.
tacos.
Well, maybe very, very clearly. That's definitely one of the benefits for sure. That's a great potential. But I'm not just talking about food. Music and cinema and culture and life. Let's face it. All the restaurants are closing at 9 o'clock. This country's getting a little bit sleepy. We need some new people. We need some new energy, right? But anyway, that's just my personal point. But the crisis that's coming of migration can only be as bad as we create it to be. If we treat people horribly, yes, they will treat us horribly back. If our intention is to criminalize migration, yes, then we're creating an atmosphere of authoritarianism, of fascism, of criminalizing normal behavior. And I would add that it is the countries of the West, the United States and the industrialized nations of Europe, who bear the responsibility for climate change, right? By and large, indigenous people in South America and in Africa did not cause climate change. By and large, poor people throughout the world have not had the emissions profiles of somebody who's driving a V8 truck to work every day alone in their car. You know what I mean? I think it's Americans are using a lot of energy, and we're reaping the benefits of that energy. And those other places that have not had historically that industrial base are losing the most. They're losing their forests, they're losing their water, their people are starving. That's loss and damage to those places that is caused by climate change, which is caused by the industrial processes created by the West and by colonialism. So it is a form of justice, essentially, to understand that these people need to be taken care of rather than, and also, by the way, it's not these people, it's us, right? 1 out of every 3 Americans is going to have to move. So either we're going to be on the move or we're going to be welcoming other folks, right? So that is a crisis that needs to be managed and needs to be understood. And the act of welcoming can be symbolized by a table, right? So the welcome table is an event at the Music Box on April 20th, where we have all these wonderful musicians and bands. John Boutte sings our song. He sings the welcome table. And we are, so over the last 5 years, I've been documenting. I'm a documentary filmmaker, for those of you who don't know, and I'm a narrative filmmaker as well, but documentaries lately have been more popular. So mine anyway. I'm making this film about climate refugees, and it's gone all over the world, from Kenya to Tanzania to Europe, to South America and Brazil, and Peru, and Australia, and I've been and all throughout the United States. And I've been documenting the stories of people who've been displaced by climate change, whether they were burned out of their homes in Paradise, California, or Boulder, Colorado, or lost their homes due to Hurricane Ida in southern Louisiana, or the hurricanes Irma and Maria in the Virgin Islands in the Caribbean, or landslides in Brazil. There are a group of people from all these nations, 9 different nations and regions, who are featured in the film, coming to New Orleans next week, where they're going to meet each other for the first time and discuss their commonalities and their strategies for dealing with migration. These are climate leaders. These are first responders. They are the refugees themselves. And then we're all going to the Music Box, and we put a 1,000-foot-long table up on the levee, and we're going to walk over there, second line over there. We already have, I think, 800 and something tickets sold. So we have not that many slots left. And we're all going to second line over to that table and create an image. It's not a table where there's food. It's not a table where there's drinks. It's not a table where there's even chairs. There's just your place at the table. It's a symbol. And symbolic images in today's media, today's world, mean a lot, right? The wall itself is really just a symbol. The wall is not necessarily effective as a barrier. It is a symbol of hate, xenophobia, of keep out. And a table is the opposite symbol. And we're hoping that other symbolism of tables can be stronger than that symbol of the wall. Wake something up inside of people. Wake something up that says, oh, you know what? Welcoming, that's a really great virtue. That's a great value. Welcoming is something we all have to aspire to. Why are we not doing that more? And so it's a piece of art. It's a way to think, and it's also a New Orleans style celebration. And that's happening on April 20th at the Music Box Village. The welcometablefilm.com. We have an Eventbrite. You can go and sign up, and it's free.
Josh's concept is that a wall turned on its side is a table, and harkens to the great American melting pot in his new film and experiment culminating in New Orleans, The Welcome Table.
They're one of the reasons why New Orleans culture is as vibrant and amazing as it is because it's an incredible cultural mixing place. Same thing with the city where I come from, which is New York City. Right. I am a first-generation American. My parents were immigrants. My father was a refugee. He was an infant survivor of the Holocaust. My father was a displaced person until he was 10 years old. So there is something of this that I know about in terms of my family history. But the truth of the matter is, yes, this is where the American experiment works the best. Not where we're kicking people out, but where we're actually bringing people together. And those are these great cities that have cultures that were born of the incredible celebration of different cultures coming together. Now, that's not always been an easy process at all, of course. That has been a process that's been fraught with violence and racism and misunderstanding and anger and competition. Can we realize that greed and competition and racism were probably not the best values to build a society upon? Can we realize that the other part of this that has always happened, sort of outside of the spotlight, which is the sharing and the generosity and the collaboration and the solidarity and the respect for other people, for people who are different, whether that is people of different races or different sexual preferences or different language or different culture. Can we realize that that is the strength that we have, that we actually can do that, and that can be operationalized? And so there is a whole world right now of mutual aid and first responders who are dealing with climate. We're dealing with all these multiple crises. These are the leaders that we need to look to. And that's what this film is celebrating. And that's what this event celebrates. So this film is not going to be coming out until 2025. And it'll be on HBO. Well, it takes a long time to edit these things, right? But this is the final scene that we're shooting, right? So we've done all the shooting throughout the whole world already, but this is the final shoot of this the final moment of this film to create this image of this big table with people celebrating around it.
Josh's film prominently features New Orleans jazz singer and cultural bearer John Boutte. How did you get New Orleans' own John Boutte involved?
Well, okay, it's a funny story because I was actually I was thinking about calling this movie The Border Table. And my first idea was, can we put a really long table along the border between Texas and Mexico? And then I realized I wanted to make a movie about climate change more than I wanted to make a movie just specifically about that one border. And at that time, I was wrestling with these concepts and I was thinking about what I was proposing to HBO, who's done 3 of my movies in the past, Gasland and Gasland Part 2 and How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change. Those 3 movies were very successful on HBO. So I was going back to them with an idea, and a border table was sort of the concept. And around that time, this was in 2019, I was campaigning with Bernie Sanders. I was a Bernie Sanders surrogate in both 2016 and 2020. And he had called me to Columbia, South Carolina, and we were going there to talk about water because there was, in the poor communities in South Carolina, the water was in bad shape. And I was advising him about water because so much of the fracking issue has to do with chemicals in water. And we got there at like 10 o'clock at night, and it was just me and Heather Goutney and Dr. Cornel West. And we get there and there's no place to eat. We're starving, just getting off the plane, and it's 10:30 or 11, and so the only place open was McDonald's. So I'm literally sitting in the back seat of this rental car in South Carolina with Cornel West, and we're eating crappy McDonald's food. And I start telling him about the border table, and he goes, James Baldwin's final work was called The Welcome Table. And it was a novel, but nobody's read it because he never finished it, and blah blah blah. And I was like, wow, what the welcome table? That's a much better idea. And then I came back to New Orleans and I went to see John playing at DBA one night, and we met and we got along very. It was just one of those meetings where you meet an artist and a friend who you just know is just going to be a friend and an artist and a person you work with, and it just was this weird sort of magical conversation because he had seen my work and I loved his music. And then I took his CD home and it said, boom, there's On the Welcome Table, on his version of the Welcome Table on the CD. And I just thought, this is insane. And I listened. He created a version of the Welcome Table, which is an old Southern spiritual song that's coming from slavery, about picturing some ideal future. In some ways, it's a heaven image, but that's not the way John interprets it. He calls it his secular gospel song, so it is that kind of it's got a long tradition inside that song, but it was this weird set of coincidences. And so when I told John about the idea, I said, listen, I've been working on this movie. I think if you sang the Welcome Table song at the beginning of it, and if you go to thewelcometablefilm.com, you can see our 5-minute trailer, which is basically a trailer for this event because we were, raising money to do this. And John is singing that song at the very opening of the film to an empty table, very long table, empty table on the top of the levee. And at the end of the film, that table is going to be full. And he's going to be singing it with this marching band, the Recreations band, which is a band of young people who are doing our second line band. So it's a fulfillment of it's the completion of a known incompletion, which is a way that you deal with drama. It's the completion of a known incompletion. It's incomplete at the beginning, and at the end, the image becomes complete. And we are creating this crazy table, and that's our job right now as a human race. We have to create a paradise out of hell, because we're headed into hell. We're headed into a very, very difficult period of time. And people used to say to me, "Why are you living in New Orleans? Are you crazy? It's going to be a hurricane. It's not going to be there much longer. You're going to be underwater." You know what? Now everywhere is New Orleans. Right? You're going to be dealing with fires in California. The sky turned orange in New York City. More people died from Hurricane Ida in New York City than did in New Orleans, right? Everywhere on earth, you're suffering climate impacts. Everywhere is New Orleans. You might as well be in New Orleans because it's better. Like Bob Dylan says, I like a lot of places, but I like New Orleans better. And so we don't know what is coming, but we do know that there are lessons in this amazing city of how do we survive. And how do we stay together? There are bad lessons and good lessons. And John Boutte is one of those people who bears this culture on his back every time he opens his mouth. He's from Treme, displaced from Treme during the Katrina and displaced by gentrification, and is one of those voices that you absolutely must listen to at any given moment when you get a chance to.
Let's have another chance to right now with John Boutte's Treme song on 102.3 WHIV LP New Orleans.
trombone groans and a big horn moans. There's a saxophone. Sisters moan in a blessed tone. Down in the tramway, it's me and my baby. We're all going crazy, bug jumping and having fun. Down in the tramway, it's me and my baby. We're all going crazy, bug jumping and having fun. Trumpet bells ringing, bass drum swinging, as the trombone groans and the big horn moans. There's a saxophone. Down in the tramway, it's me and my baby. We're all going crazy, bug jumping and having fun. Down in the tramway, it's me and my baby. We're all going crazy, bug jumping and having fun. Down in the tramway, it's me and my baby. We're all going crazy, bug jumping and having fun.
If you're just tuning in, this is Gulf Rising, and we are speaking with environmental film director Josh Fox, whose award-winning documentaries have featured on Netflix and HBO. After traveling the world for a decade making documentaries about climate change, I find his perspective on New Orleans to be invaluable.
Oil and gas interests still fund and run everything. As we know, French Quarter Fest, which is a most wonderful festival, is marred and blighted by the Chevron logo of an oil company. And the same thing is true of Jazz Fest, which is Shell. Those companies have to be banished from this city and from this world. They are criminal undertakings at this point. They are destroying our future. They should be nowhere near a sign celebrating anything. The only place you should see the name Chevron or Shell is somewhere in the International Criminal Court, as far as I'm concerned. So we have, for the welcome table, a sponsor, which is a solar company from New Orleans, Posigen. Posigen, and speaking of mutual aid, during Hurricane Ida, a bunch of us got together and we got all these donations from solar companies through a foundation called Empowered by Light. We got about 19 different solar mutual aid stations built. They were solar panel farms with batteries, and that we deployed them. There were 19 of them throughout the South, and in some places closer to in Homa, where real Ida damage had knocked out all the power. And so solar and batteries got clean energy to aid stations where people were charging their phones and charging their nebulizers. And even in Algiers, there was one of them. And those stations actually came in quicker than Entergy and the fossil fuel industry could. And in fact, it makes absolutely no sense for what they did. I mean, Entergy set poles and wires back up after Hurricane Ida. We should have had solar microgrids installed everywhere, it would have been cheaper, it would have been more resilient, and it would have been clean energy. More people died after Ida from carbon monoxide poisoning, from running diesel generators and gas generators in their backyard, and the carbon monoxide went into their house and killed them. And that doesn't happen when you have a solar power energy, right? So Posigen and a group called the Footprint Project. The Footprint Project has these emergency solar stations. They came all the way down from Minneapolis, I think. They liked New Orleans so much they never left. They came to a couple of parties at my house and they never left after that. And Footprint Project, and those companies are featured in the beginning of the film as doing charity work, heroic charity work. But the thing about Posigen, which is fascinating, which is in New Orleans, they figured out how to get solar energy to lower income and middle income people. Most solar panels are the game of rich people, right? Because you have to own your own house, you have to have a certain credit score, but that shouldn't be a factor in terms of renewable energy. Having solar panels on your roof should simply be a matter of whether or not it's cheaper to do that, right? So they figured that out, and we're very grateful to Posigen. They contributed funds to us to get these people here from all over the world, to get the incredible, amazing group delegations from Brazil and Peru and Nigeria and Italy that are coming to New Orleans. And but beyond that, look, we got to get Shell and Chevron out of here. These are the companies that are bringing about the potential demise, not only of this city, but of every coastal city in the world. It is wholly inappropriate that we have them anywhere near our cultural events.
Josh is passionate because he has spent a decade understanding what oil and gas has done, and his documentaries, Gasland and Gasland 2, dive into helping us understand as well the realities of climate change and big oil.
Back in 2008, I was living in the Upper Delaware River Basin. I come from New York City, and I have a long relationship to the 100 miles away where the river and the reservoirs gather water. It's called the New York City watershed. And the Delaware River Basin, it's one of the last pristine rivers on earth. And that's a river that's average of 4 feet deep. It's a recreational river. And that area, the oil industry came and knocked on my door and said, we want to lease your land, 20 acres. And we're going to pay you $5,000 an acre, roughly. And we're just going to do this thing where we sort of put a fire hydrant in the middle of your field, and it's just going to extract natural gas, and it's called fracking. And I was like, what? And then I quickly realized that it was not just me, it was the whole town, it was the whole state, it was the whole area, that the oil industry was descending upon this natural place, this place that New York City and Philadelphia depended on. 16 million people depended on that area for water. And they were going to come and do this thing called fracking. And nobody had heard about fracking. What is fracking? And so I went to a few little information sessions, and the more that I learned, the more horrified I was. And the more I learned that this was all sort of literally devised by Dick Cheney, the dark evil overlord of many, many documentaries. I started to work on this and realized that nobody was talking about fracking. And I went across the country and did a sort of comparative study, going from Wyoming to Colorado, to Texas, to Arizona, Arkansas, and here to Louisiana, to study the impacts of fracking. And along the way, we met some people whose water was so contaminated with methane and other chemicals that they could light it on fire. And this scene was one of the first viral videos of these guys in Colorado who would run their tap, put a cigarette lighter under it, and boom, huge explosion would come, lighting their water on fire. And that scene became super viral. The film Gasland was the film that really taught the world about fracking, and we redefined fracking, or defined it for the first time. We put the K in. The industry didn't have the K. It was fracking. We put in the K. I put in the K to make it a little bit more ugly of a word. And thankfully that stuck. We taught the world about fracking, and that film premiered at Sundance Film Festival. It won the Critics Poll. It won Special Jury Prize. It was picked up by HBO. And this is a film that I made for $5, basically. It was purchased by HBO, went on HBO, and it was seen in 30 countries to, I don't know, several 100 million person audience. And then we toured it. We toured to 500 cities over the course of the 3 films, Gasland Part 2, Gasland 1, Gasland 2, which came out in 2013, also on HBO, and a film called How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change, which was on HBO as well. We toured 500 cities, and in each of those places worked with on-the-ground grassroots organizations, mom and pop NGOs, and the big greens, and we created this, not created, but we helped galvanize an international movement against fracking. And we eventually won. We banned fracking in the state of New York. We banned fracking in the Delaware River Basin. So we saved that pristine, beautiful river.
This seems to be how it happens, where ordinary people are encountered by something that just feels weird and then dive down the rabbit hole.
But now it is a place that, the good guys won, kept the oil industry out. And in that making that film, sort of became a spokesperson on extractive energy, certainly on fracking, and how incredibly damaging it is to resources to drill into the ground, inject a whole bunch of chemicals, and destroy the water, because you have to drill through the water table to get to the oil and the gas that's underneath it. And then you have to transport that oil and gas back up through the water table. And often that process is faulty and it leaks. And you contaminate underground water supplies, which of course never ever can really get cleaned. The BP oil spill is a perfect example of this. You had a casing failure, you had a well explosion, a blowout, and it was 5,000 feet down, and another, it was very, very deep. So it was very, very hard for them to fix it. And you had two months of an enormous devastation in the Gulf. But this is happening onshore all the time. I mean, there's enough onshore spills, I think every couple of years, to make a whole Exxon Valdez like 30 times over. So we're spreading chemical waste all throughout our landscape. And that's what Gasland, the film, is about. Additionally, the key ingredient in plastic is fracked gas. So it's not just about, oh, I like a gas stove. By the way, you shouldn't like your gas stove. It has shown that gas stoves cause childhood asthma. At least 10% of all childhood asthma cases are caused by the fact that you have a toxic off-gassing material in your house all the time when you're using a gas stove. And for those of you who are cooks out there who are like, oh, but gas is so much better than electric. I'm Italian, I'm a cook. I hate having a gas stove. Electric is way much easier to control and better. And so you're also harming yourself and you're harming your children by having gas. They're actually passing laws right now in a lot of places that are outlawing those gas stoves because they're so bad for children. But that is not the principal end use. The gas is used for electricity, but it's also used to create plastic. And the great irony and the horror of all of this is, although we saved that region from fracking, we now have plastic in the air. We have plastic in the clouds. I mean, if you look at the bright side, soon it's going to rain bottled water. Kidding, that's a joke. But the point is that, we have so much plastic in our atmosphere that it is literally ubiquitous. We're finding it in amniotic fluid. We're finding it in people's brains. We're finding it in tissues and lungs because it's in the air, because it volatilizes and it gets so small that it's in the air. So those water supplies that are even as pristine as they possibly can be, it's raining plastic down into them, which is a fracking product. So we've had an explosion of plastics in this country and an explosion of oil drilling, and so fracking became a very well-known subject because of those films and because of that movement. And so in many ways that's the history of this film as well, because it's really just one journey from me going from this guy who wasn't working on these issues of the environment or oil and gas, and then the knock comes at the door with the oil industry saying, hey, we'd like to give you a bunch of money. Of course, we turned it down. And that set me on this journey, and the welcome table is a part of that. It's a part of that understanding right now that one of the greatest evils that exists on the planet is the oil industry, and they have been keeping themselves in power by buying off politicians. And one of the worst places that's happening is here in Louisiana.
In case you haven't seen it yet, here's the trailer for Gasland 1. When we come back, Josh will talk about how he sees the future and what we can do to change it.
In 2006, filmmaker Josh Fox received a letter in the mail offering him $100,000 for permission to drill for natural gas on his land. He knew that in 2005, Congress had passed a bill exempting gas companies from environmental regulations. He wanted to know what impact the drilling would have on his land, so he took his camera across the United States to discover the truth about hydraulic fracturing.
The method of gas drilling they use is called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. It blasts a mix of water and chemicals 8,000 feet into the ground. The fracking itself is like a mini earthquake. The intense pressure breaks apart the rock and frees up the gas.
6 states have documented over 1,000 incidents of groundwater contamination.
It bubbles and hisses when it comes out. I won't drink it.
They can drill whether we like it or not.
It's a free-for-all. Our water was good before they started drilling. Then when they got done, it was bad.
Obviously, we have a problem here.
The Colorado Oil and Gas Commission is aware of the situation and will probably be doing some additional testing in the area as soon as possible.
There's been concern raised about the methods to tap these valuable resources. They have been characterized as environmentally risky and inadequately regulated. Such reports are not accurate.
The neurological effects are very insidious.
Everybody was sick, including me. I have these lesions in my brain.
You get pains all over your body.
If you weren't able to do this hydraulic fracturing, how much more would we be dependent on foreign oil and terrorism?
I have one quote here from you that says that you're trying to do this in a way that doesn't damage the environment. But you also said recently that water contamination is inevitable.
Well, yeah, I mean...
are those contradictory, or...?
Despite documented health risks and environmental impact, hydraulic fracturing is spreading across the globe.
It's amazing that what took Mother Nature millions of years to build can be destroyed in a few hours with a piece of heavy machinery. What it's doing is searching for a problem that does not exist.
Whoa, Jesus Christ. It's not supposed to do that.
Gasland Part 1 is about the actual impacts of fracking on the landscape, water, air, public health, people's lives. And fracking is like where you inject high pressure water and chemicals and it fractures the underground strata. And then that brings oil and gas and chemicals, to the surface. Fracking in the political sense, which is what Gasland Part 2 is about, is where you inject high pressure cash into the political system and it fractures our democracy. So Gasland Part 1 you can watch on my website, which is joshfoxfilm.com. It's there for free. It was on HBO and it was on Netflix for many years back when you could do that. You could do both. But now it's at joshfoxfilm.com for free. You can watch it. And Gasland Part 2 is at HBO Max or HBO Max, whatever it is. And you can watch it there. Gasland Part 2 is about the fracturing of our political system. We have in this country what's basically legalized corruption. Corporations are treated as individuals. They can give unlimited amount of money to politicians. And in the case of oil and gas, that's an enormous amount of influence, a legacy influence. In fact, in Gasland Part 2, which opens with the BP oil spill here in Louisiana, it shows that I believe that the Obama administration put out a report about the BP oil spill. They hired some amazing people to write this report. And this report stated that it wasn't just actual influence that happened at that moment of the spill, but 100 years of entrenched influence in our system of government that allowed for there to be no regulations on those kinds of oil wells, which caused the destruction and caused the explosion. And then that there was this other that during the crisis, it hampered the response of our major agencies to do anything about it. And so you have a legacy influence of oil and gas. Do you know that right now the oil and gas industry gets subsidies from our government? Subsidies are normally deployed for industries in their infancy to help them out, right? Like we want to have a solar industry in this country, we give them the tax dollars, millions of dollars to just try to help them go. You know what I mean? This is true in a lot of cases in our government. We give subsidies, but the oil industry is the most profitable industry on the face of the earth in history. Why we are giving them billions of dollars every year is insane. And we still have not stopped. We are subsidizing our own demise. And then that money then gets channeled back into the political system and goes into the pockets of people like Mitch McConnell and Jeff Landry and, Donald Trump. And also the Democrats too take a ton of money from the oil industry, right? And then it goes to Jazz Fest and French Quarter Fest, and it pollutes our environment culturally, not just in terms of the pollution in the air. Now, I want to make this clear. 10 million people a year die from air pollution. 10 million people a year is something like 10% of all the deaths on the planet are directly at the hands of the oil industry. That pollution comes from the oil industry. That's the murder of 10 million. And we have had alternative technologies for decades, right? It's been known for decades that in just 3 states, the wind in North Dakota, Kansas, and Texas can power everything in the United States, including our entire fleet of cars, if there were to be all electric cars, right? Now, I'm not in favor of electric cars because I don't like cars, but the point is that like we have the energy from other sources. We do not need oil and gas. We do not need coal. We do not need oil and gas. We do not need coal in the world today at all, period. And yet that we are using 18th century technology right now, right? So it's like, it's as if these things never happened, like, and we're doing Morse code, like, that's the level of technology that we're at right now. And that's because this political system has been completely strangled by the cash, by the influence. Like, if you can imagine, the oil industry is getting all this money just to make more oil and gas. You know who should be getting that money? Me and you. I should get that money every time I ride my bicycle. I should get that money every time I have a vegetarian meal. I should get that money every time I turn off the air conditioner. Because the bottom line is the more I'm conserving, the more I should be paid, right? We're talking about $8 billion in subsidies every year. Can you imagine how fast bike lanes would get built if you actually got paid to ride your bike to work instead of take your SUV, right? That money should be going towards fixing this problem. How do we fix it? Well, cars are one of the number one sources of emissions in the world, in America. Our cell phones are a huge source of emissions. Can you imagine that every time you turned off your cell phone, you got paid? That's what those subsidies should be used for. That would be the right direction. But instead, people who ride their bikes get killed and yelled at by people who are driving giant trucks and SUVs. And we're just sort of like, oh, can't do anything about it. Oops, I don't know. Meanwhile, there's huge amounts of money that are going into the fuel tanks of those cars that is coming from our tax dollars. I am literally paying for people to guzzle gasoline, when in fact, if we took those subsidies away, the prices would go up and we could actually redirect that fund, those money, towards people who are doing things that were good for the planet. That would make sense.
Luckily, because we know that something is coming, we can start to prepare ourselves and our communities for that inevitability.
So I'm teaching a class with a guy named Daniel Pinchbeck. He's a New York Times bestselling author, very interesting person, who I just happened to meet at this weird conference in Amsterdam on design and on climate change. And it turns out we have the same high school teacher, our same mentor. He's older than me. He went to my high school, this tiny little socialist high school in New York City, on like about 7 or 8 years before me. But we had the same history teacher. And so we got to talking, and his work is all in, a lot of his work is about climate and social justice, but also he wrote a book called Breaking the Brain, which is about ayahuasca. It's sort of a classic of the psychedelic, psychotropic world. And he comes from a totally different angle. And he said, well, I've been doing these online classes, would love to do one with you. So what do you think? And he had this idea of a class called Embracing Our Emergency, which is, in a way like a paradise built in hell, like Rebecca Solnit's idea, that to understand the climate emergency, we have to embrace it. We have to understand that it's not just about doom and gloom, but it's also about transformational change. And the welcome table is one of those things that could be a spirit of transformational change. So we are not just to look at the negative aspects of it, but also, the world of greed and racism and competition doesn't make us happy anyway, right? As it turns out, being addicted to TikTok doesn't make you happy anyway, right? As it turns out, some of these things make us miserable. So why don't we take this opportunity as a transformational opportunity? So I put out a call to a bunch of my friends to drop in and co-teach this class, teach like an hour-long module. And much to my delight and surprise, a lot of them said yes. So co-teaching this class is Bill McKibben, Jane Fonda, Michael Mann, the climate scientist, Marianne Williamson, Chie Bastida, Doug Goodfeather, who I made the film Awake, the Standing Rock film that I made that was on Netflix. It's an extraordinary lineup of just an unbelievable. Francis Moore LePay, who wrote Diet for a Small Planet, just signed up. The people who run Climate Defiance, this very new group, they're going to teach a module. So it's a 6-week class. There's 3-hour sessions, I think twice a week.
Embracing Our Emergency starts at the end of April and goes through May, and occurs on Wednesdays and Sundays in 2 to 3 hour segments. You can find more at liminal.news.
I want to see that beautiful city. 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 One of these days, and I want to sit at the welcome table. Yes, I want to sit at the welcome table. And I'm going to sit at the welcome table. Sit at the welcome table, see that beautiful city. One of these days, and I like to sing and never get tired. Well, I want to sing and never get tired. Well, I want to sing and never get tired. Sing and never get tired. Sit at the welcome table, see that beautiful city. One of these days, one of these days, one of these days, one of these days, one of these days. One of these days, one of these days, one of these days, one of these days, hey, one of these days. Sing and never get tired. Sit at the welcome table. See that beautiful city. One of these days, one of these. Woo!
This welcome table is the biggest film shoot I've ever tried to pull off. It's literally like hundreds of people, guests from 12 different or 15 guests from 9 different nations and regions. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. I want to know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen.
You are listening to 102.3 WHIV LP New Orleans. We are speaking with Josh Fox about his upcoming project, The Welcome Table. That was John Boutte with a song by the same name.
What we're doing the first week is all just us by ourselves. So people from these different countries, these delegations are coming this weekend, right?
Okay.
So some of them are actually coming as soon as tomorrow. So we have an Aboriginal elder from Australia coming, whose name is Delta K. She'll be here, I think it's tomorrow. Purity Gakuo, who works with Impact Kenya. Impact Kenya is the indigenous movement for peace and conflict transformation. So they work with indigenous populations in Kenya for their justice. Purity is going to be here, I think, on Saturday. And then a whole bunch of the people from Brazil are coming. Leo Farah, who is a world-renowned first responder and firefighter who started his own organization to respond to disasters. The Brazilian group is coming on Sunday. So some of them are going to get a chance to see a little of the French Border Fest, which is great. And these people, so for the whole week, though, of the 15th through the 20th, we're having our own private discussions, which we are filming at various locations around New Orleans, because these people have never met each other, right? Normally in a film like this, a documentary like this, you're doing location shooting all over the place, right? And those people, let's say Gasland, they don't get to meet each other until the premiere of the film. And they don't even know anything about what the film is going to be like, because you work on this stuff and then you premiere the film and they see themselves. And that moment when all of the subjects meet each other, I remember at Gasland 2 premiere, was at Tribeca Film Festival. We had 40 people from the movie, and there were families from Texas and Wyoming and California and Colorado. And we had a whole bunch of celebrity advocate people who had helped with the film. We had Yoko Ono and Deborah Winger and the whole staff from HBO. And we had all the experts from the government who were there. There was 40 people on stage. It was unbelievable. But the energy of that meeting, it created lifelong friends. The folks in Colorado and the folks from Texas and the folks from Wyoming and the folks from Pennsylvania who had been suffering from fracking, who were there and finally got to meet, they became friends and worked together on events for a decade or more afterwards. And so I just thought, that's one of the best scenes, but it's never in the movie. So that's what this welcome table is sort of like. All the folks from the film, although they haven't seen the film, I'm sending out today a brief video introduction to all the people who are in the movie. And we're going to send that out to the people who've already signed up for the Eventbrite so that people can get a sense, because we can't show the film at the Music Box. It's the daytime. So we can't show pieces of it, although the people will be there and they'll speak. But that's the fun. That'll be the joy of these people meeting. And I really want to know what they're going to say to each other. Like, what is the Aboriginal leader going to say to the indigenous leader at Pointe-au-Chien from the Pointe-au-Chien tribe from Louisiana? And what are they going to say, to the mayor of this town from Italy who brought migrants into the town instead of pushing them out? And then we have a number of conversations that can happen between musicians. Like, one of the stories in the film is a Nigerian guy named Chris Obehi. He left Nigeria. He survived a trip across the Sahara Desert. He survived getting stuck in Libyan prison and somehow got out of Libyan prison. And then he survived the boat ride across the Mediterranean and saved a baby in the process, got picked up by a relief organization. And now he's a famous musician in Sicily. So he and John Boutte have had conversations about what they're going to play together. So this is what I'm talking about when we're celebrating each other and celebrating conversation and dialogue, celebrating solutions and understanding. I think of it like a Shakespearean comedy. In the Shakespearean comedies, you have this great cataclysm or a political problem where the lovers are all thrown into the forest, right? They're thrown into the forest of Arden and As You Like It, or they're thrown onto a desert island and in The Tempest. And in the end, they all come together and have a big banquet and get married.
Thanks for joining us on Gulf Rising. I'm your host, Misha Mayer.